Welcome to DFS Karma, where we talk about our favorite fantasy sports plays for football, basketball, baseball, and pretty much everything else. Be sure to check out and create an account with all of our partners, such as MonkeyKnifeFight.online, PrizePicks.online, and StatHero.online. Use the promo code KARMA on any of these sites to get an exclusive deposit bonus. And don't forget to check out all of our free fantasy content on DFSKarma.com, as well as our own premium plays. Without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Please welcome today's hosts.
What is up, Karma Nation? Welcome into the Week 4 edition of the Perfect Pivot, our tournament podcast. You guys have probably been watching at this point, but if you haven't, we will be discussing who are the chalk options at the moment, and then we will be telling our favorite tournament pivots off of them. I will say this is a little bit of a weird week where it doesn't seem like there's too much chalk. There's only, honestly, a few players that I think are going to be super high owned, and we'll obviously get into it. Before we start, last week was mixed results kind of for Karma. I know that I hit both my tournament lineups, FanDuel and DraftKings. They ended up being a Seattle stack on DraftKings, and I went with a Minnesota stack on FanDuel. I also came very, very close to a 1 p.m. takedown. Ben split, went 1-1. Won FanDuel again, a perfect 3-0, I believe, and dropped DraftKings to 1-2, correct?
Yeah, we're going. So a lot of people in our Discord I know play FanDuel. So we're going for the perfect 4-0 on Sunday. I can feel it.
I like it. I feel like we're going to get there. It's a good week for it, honestly. There's a lot of really good games, and if there's not going to be too many guys that are super chalky, it's going to make for a really fun week where you don't really need to worry about getting burned by one guy in particular. But we can start breaking down. We'll go position by position, excluding defense. Starting at quarterback, I don't know about you, but I truly don't believe there's one chalk option at quarterback. I think the highest owned guys will likely end up being probably Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and I think you might add Josh Allen at this point in there. It seems like he's kind of becoming like the easy plug and play, specifically for cash because he's been playing so well. There are other guys that will get some value or get some ownership, but I mean, we don't really need to go over all of them. So who are you looking at if you're just excluding that trio? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, I think Watson's probably going to end up pretty popular too, just because of his matchup with the Vikings. Now that it looks like that game for sure is going to play, but my favorite pivot's Joe Burrow. My game-by-game article is up on the website, so you can go check that out and see what I wrote about Joe Burrow. But one of the things I talked about was, he's second in the NFL in pass attempts right now, so we know he's getting volume. And we saw in that game against the Browns, he threw it 60 times. They're completely fine airing the ball out and just letting him throw. And the Bengals are playing pretty fast. One of the fastest teams in the NFL right now, so that's good. Like, obviously, we like both of those things, but he actually has more rush attempts than Deshaun Watson this season. He has more rush attempts than Dak Prescott this season, and that's something you and I know both talked about preseason, is that he actually does have rushing ability, and it seems like the Texans are content just not wanting Watson to run and trying to keep him healthy. So I think that their ceilings are relatively the same. This is the best matchup Burrow's had. A really strong matchup against the Jaguars, who a week ago Ryan Fitzpatrick ran all over. So I think it's upside for him on the ground. I think it's upside through the air. And I'm considering him in cash. I don't think he's going to be super popular, but I think he's one of the best plays on the slate, probably my favorite overall play on the slate. And I'm planning on being overweight him.
I like it. I have no issues whatsoever with Burrow. My pick, I mean, we all know who it's going to be. It's just Ryan Fitzpatrick. I tweeted it this week. I wrote him up in both of my articles. I talked about him on Game Theory. Like, everywhere that I'm going is Ryan Fitzpatrick. I will say the one thing, obviously Seattle's a great matchup. They're giving up basically 430 passing yards per game. That's not sustainable. It's like basically 150 yards more than the highest team allowed last year, which I believe was Detroit. So there's no way it's sustainable, but Fitzpatrick has the gunslinger mentality, and we know he's going to walk in there and throw it. If you want to know more of what I'm thinking about him, just go to dfskarma.com. You can find my articles. I talk about him literally everywhere. So I'll move to someone else, which will be Kirk Cousins for only 200 more. Cousins, everyone believes he's been bad, and I agree that Minnesota's been bad as a team, but Cousins posted 22 and 21 in 2 of his 3 starts. It just so happens when he played Indy, he scored basically 1. He's only 5,600. He gets a great matchup against Houston. This game is really likely to shoot out, and I went to Minnesota last week in a game that I thought was going to shoot out. I'll do it once again this week. And at 5,600, you don't really need the 35 fantasy points. Not to mention, this is kind of weird, but Kirk Cousins has not completed more than 20 passes in a game this year. And he still scored over 20 fantasy points in 2 out of 3. So the upside is there. He just hasn't really shown it. I am willing to take the shot on him, especially against Houston, though. If for some reason I don't go Fitzpatrick, which I'm more or less guaranteeing you guys that in tournaments I will play Ryan Fitzpatrick this week.
Yeah, I might play him in cash on DraftKings because he's so cheap. That's an interesting stat about Cousins, though. Not completing 20 passes. It's pretty funny.
It's impressive, right? Like, yeah. He's throwing the ball. He's not throwing it a lot, but like his highest attempt total was 27. You would think that he would be able to get to 20 on that. He doesn't even have 20, and he completed 19 against Green Bay. They just, for whatever reason, Minnesota just hasn't had the ball a ton this year. And I think that's going to fix itself, honestly. But we can move forward to running back. I mean, we know where the chalk's going. It's Alvin Kamara. And then one of the other chalkier running backs. I don't know if too many people are going to use him now that Michael Thomas has been ruled out, but Zeke is going to get some ownership. So let's just cross off Kamara, cross off Zeke. I think we're going the same player here, and I think it's a pretty obvious play that just isn't going to get that much ownership. So you go ahead and tell me where you're going.
Yeah, the obvious pivot off the top guys is Dalvin Cook. Look, the matchup's really strong. Obviously, there's a bunch of points expected in this game, but the Texans have been gashed on the ground from the first week of the season. When they saw Clyde Edwards-Hilaire on that Thursday night game, and it's just carried over from then. We saw Dalvin Cook. He got back up. So the first week they kind of limited him a little bit, which could be expected since we saw, a limited training camp. But he was, clearly the guy. Per usual in their last game, has a massive red zone role. Like, if they get inside the 10, they're giving the ball to Dalvin Cook. And he obviously has upside in the passing game as well. So it wouldn't shock me if he outscores, Zeke Elliott at, less ownership, especially on DraftKings, because Zeke at whatever he's at, under 8K, is definitely going to get some ownership. So I think Cook is like the obvious pivot if you're spending up on guys.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke is 78 in a game against Cleveland. That I believe is one of the highest totals on the slate.
Yeah, I think it is the highest now. I think he got up to 56.
Oh, man. Yeah, he'll definitely get ownership. We know that Kamara is going to get basically all of it with Michael Thomas out after what he did against Green Bay. I will just echo what Ben said. It's Dalvin Cook. If I'm not stacking Minnesota, I mean, I am very confident that I'll end up with Dalvin Cook. We saw what he did last week, and now this is an even better matchup. Not to mention he had 5 targets and only 2 catches, so a little bit more upside. If you're paying down, it looks like you're going to go Mike Davis or slightly above that at 6,000. You'll go Kenyan Drake against Carolina. Really good matchup. They play each other. Mike Davis has been just ridiculously involved in the passing game. And with CMC still out, Davis is basically thrust into more or less a workhorse role. So at 5,700, he's going to get quite a bit of ownership. And then if the others stay around this but don't play Davis, it's probably just going to fall on Kenyan Drake. So eliminating those two, who are you pivoting to?
Yeah, I know we both really like someone in the sub 6K range on DraftKings, but another guy that sticks out to me at 6,400 is Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. So obviously he kind of gets that discount because he played on Monday night, and they never, they released the prices prior to Monday night. But if you look at his game log, 25 touches in week 1, 16 touches in week 2, and then Saul 25 touches last week against the Ravens. We know that Bill is going to take away the top option on the opposing offense, which I assume he's going to game plan to get rid of Travis Kelce. Gilmore, I mean, he might see Tyreek on some plays, but they're able to move Tyreek Hill around enough that I think they can get him off of Gilmore sometimes. But I think the large focus will be put on Kelce. And I'm assuming the Chiefs are going to, like, how can you argue that the Chiefs won't be winning any game that they play, right? So I think it would make sense, for him to get some, obviously. And he finally got involved in the passing game the last couple weeks, 6 and 5 catches, which is what we were looking for after that first game. So I think 6,400 is just too cheap for someone of his ability in that offense. So I think he's a really strong play in tournaments.
Yeah, I really like that. There's 2 guys that I'll say here. The first one, I'm going up a little bit higher than Hilaire, and I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor. He's been chalk week 2 and 3, right?
Yep.
And then he did extremely well week 2. He dropped 22. And then week 3, they got out to a really early lead and blew out the Jets, so he didn't play that much. At 6,600, his price tag is still relatively low. He gets the best offensive defensive line in terms of a run matchup, according to Pro Football Focus, on the entire slate. And I mean, nothing is even close. Now, all of a sudden, Jonathan Taylor is not the chalk. I mean,
yeah, people are like freaked out like about his usage last week. He literally got game scripted out. Like, they already lost Marlon Mack. They're not going to risk losing him in some stupid game against the Jets that their defense is scoring more points than the Jets do.
He played 40% of the snaps.
Yeah,
and then
I mean, they scored 2 defensive that took like probably 3 to 4 possessions away from him.
Are you scared of Wilkins stealing Jonathan Taylor snaps? Like, for real. Don't get me wrong, dude. Taylor has looked pretty bad. He has not been good. But I don't care because we think he's good, right? Like, we're not souring over 3 games. So if you legitimately think that the guy's a good player and you've changed your mind after 3 games in the NFL, one of which he went over 100. I know he had 26 carries, but still, and he's already has more receiving usage than what many were expecting. I don't know how you could have thought that he was good coming into the season, but now think that he's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't think he looked that bad in the Minnesota game. It was just like he just didn't get that much work last week. Like, I feel like if he would have got his usual workload, he probably would have busted a long run at some point.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, but the matchup against Chicago is really good.
Yeah.
The other guy that we're referring to that we are both on is Daryl Henderson. Cam Akers was ruled out today, which, in my opinion, I don't like it. I wish that he was playing because I think it would keep his ownership low. If we can still get it extremely low, that's fantastic. But good matchup against the Giants. Rams are playing at home. They gave him a 1-yard touchdown. So personally, I'm not as afraid of Brown stealing his touchdowns, especially after he saw 20 carries last week. Like, Sean McVay said he's going to ride the hot hand in a running back by committee. Well, Henderson has very easily proven to be the hot hand. He has a little bit of receiving upside, and the Rams are they up to like two touchdown favorites yet? Like, where are they sitting at?
Yeah, I mean,
the moment?
Literally, so they're first in the NFL in rush attempts per game as a team, 37. They're running the ball 37 times a game as a team, and they're a massive home favorite. So you would assume that against the Giants, they're going to be running the ball again. Yeah, dude, Henderson was like the sleeper pick last year. Like, people have just forgotten this because they drafted Cam Akers. But
Yeah.
I don't know if, like, them drafting Cam Akers, we probably never should have thought that just eliminates Henderson. If, I guess we should have thought that Jared Goff wasn't going to lead the league in pass attempts again, right? I mean, that was just not a recipe for success. So them drafting Cam Akers just pointed that they were going to run the ball more, maybe not necessarily hurt Henderson. But he's just such a good play, dude. He's such a good play.
We, as fantasy football players, we do one very clear thing where we take we can't get rid of recency bias. It's the same with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. And I fell into the trap of thinking that Cam Akers was going to come in and be a workhorse, not immediately, but more or less just take over, forgetting how much me and you specifically like Daryl Henderson last year. Remember, we were taking him way too early, way too early, just really high on the guy. And then they drafted Cam Akers, and I fell trap into it where I was like, oh, that's really going to hurt Henderson. The same way that a lot of people were thinking Zach Moss is immediately going to come in and take over for Devin Singletary. Well, they can use multiple backs. I don't know. It's just a really good spot for Henderson, especially with Akers out now. But I mean, Henderson is very talented, and I feel like it would be shocking if he doesn't at least go for 100 in this game.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving to receiver. So the big news, obviously, is Michael Thomas is out. Thank God, because his price tag was absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. He would have been basically the highest owned player ever.
Yeah, he would have been pretty chalky on DraftKings for sure.
Yeah, I think we're down to. I don't know if I want to say that there's any receiver at the moment that is just going to get ridiculous ownership. DeAndre Hopkins is hurt. They said he's a game time decision. I'm expecting him to play. I do think he'll be relatively chalky, assuming he plays. And then near the top, we have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who will both garner ownership, 200 away from each other. But they're three of, I believe, the top five most expensive wide receivers on the slate. So who are you going if you're not going with one of the Seattle guys or Hopkins near the top?
Yeah, I think I would just drop down to $6,100. Tyler Boyd. Kind of talked about Burrow. Just be looking to stack them in my main tournament team. Might stack them in cash on FanDuel if I end up going with Burrow, but he has 21 targets over the last 2 games. The Jaguars have really struggled in the slot again this season, which obviously is good for him. And I know AJ Green is everyone's talking about AJ Green as the bounce back play. He just hasn't looked good enough for me to trust him. And I know T. Higgins kind of emerged in that game against the Eagles, but he scored 2 red zone touchdowns. I think Boyd is still clearly the lead guy for Burrow, and I think he's priced perfectly where he's not going to get a ton of ownership. So I think it just makes sense to go with Boyd as the stack with Burrow.
Yeah, 100% there. My guy is Cooper Kupp. He's 6,700, which is a little bit expensive. But I mean, the matchup is just unbelievable. The Giants struggle against the slot. Kupp came to life last week, 9 for 107 and a touchdown. He looks completely healthy. He's a pretty big part of the offense. He probably has to get his numbers prior to a blowout coming, but I don't really think that it's out of the question that he does. I do think he's an extremely risky option. I wouldn't even relatively consider him in cash, but his upside is extremely high for 6,700, especially in just what seems to be just an elite matchup.
Yeah, I like that call. So I'm just looking at things like this 5 to 6, I would say $55 to $6,500 range on DraftKings. It's loaded. Mm-hmm. You have some chalk options there with DJ Moore. But then you have Mike Evans, for example. Do you think he's going to get a ton of ownership? I don't think he's going to get that much ownership against the Chargers, but with no Godwin.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on it, but no, I don't think he's going to be one of the chalkier guys because I think most people are probably going to go up to Hopkins, and then if they're not, they're probably DJ Moore could be the highest owned receiver at 5,600, and I also believe that Will Fuller is going to get a lot of ownership at 59. Yeah. And if that's the case, they just probably won't play Mike Evans at 64.
Yeah, so I think he's a great play. I think Fuller's a great play. I'll probably play him in cash. I think Chark is a great play on the opposite side of that Cincy game. And then Odell Beckham, Anthony freaking talked about him for 20 minutes on the cash process. But, I mean, he is a good play. The Dallas secondary has not been good. You would assume that if they're able to put up points, it would force the Browns to throw a little bit more than they want to. And, I mean, 5,800 does seem too cheap for Odell Beckham Jr., right? I mean, there's a ton of good plays in that range.
Yeah, I agree. One guy that I'll add is Devonte Parker. Obviously, it's pretty clear to me that he's taking back his obvious spot as the wide receiver 1. He's not really getting the ridiculous volume, but I expect that to come more as the season progresses. And I do expect him to continue to be a red zone threat. I believe he has 1 red zone target this year that he took for a touchdown. He'll get there. I'm not really worried about that. So if I'm playing Fitzpatrick, I'm definitely stacking with Devonte Parker. And if you want to drop down to only 5,100, dude, John Brown makes a lot of sense to me. He looked really good before he got hurt last week. He practiced in full today. It looks like he's going to give it a go. I don't know. I don't love the matchup. I like it more for the running backs, but if Zach Moss is back, like I don't really want to play Singletary, and I'm not going to play Moss. So I feel like I would stack Josh Allen with like Stephon Diggs and John Brown. But I think if you're just one-offing, John Brown comes with a ton of upside for 5,100. And correct me if I'm wrong, but dude, no one is going to play him, right?
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to play John Brown. I also don't think I want to get your opinion on this because I didn't get to be on the Game 3 podcast this week, so I didn't really get to talk about this. But I think this is a really interesting spot for the Lions. They're not going to be able to run Adrian Peterson 25 times against the Saints, right? Like the Saints are going to put up points, so they're going to have to throw. Stafford had his best game of the season last week, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's better with Galladay back, but Galladay's going to be on Lattimore, and Marvin
Lattimore's
Jones
out.
Oh yeah. Is he out? I didn't see that confirmed
Yeah,
news.
he's out.
All right, well that definitely changes things for me. But I was gonna bring up Marvin Jones, just because it feels like Marvin Jones always has Marvin Jones is known for multi-touchdown games, right? Like he has these games where he scores like three touchdowns all the time, and if that turns into a shootout, you would assume most people would want to play Galladay. I don't think any of the Lions will be super high on, but most people would go with Galladay. So I think Marvin Jones at his price is interesting just because he's so cheap. But Lattimore being out does change that a little bit for me.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I like it. It just seems like when you say Detroit can't run Adrian Peterson 25 times, my initial thought immediately goes to can't they? Because they might just do it.
I just feel, but like last week, like the Cardinals did not do what we expected them to do last week, right? Like the Lions were winning the game, so they were easily running. Like I don't think the Lions are going to be winning easily against the Saints, even with Thomas out.
Yeah, but do we think it's tough for me to think that the Saints are going to blow them out to the point where they can't run? Because, I mean, if you look at all, Michael Thomas is out, Jared Cook's out, Andrews Pete's already been ruled out, Marshawn Lattimore's out. There's other guys that I can't think of at the moment that are currently questionable, maybe closer to doubtful. It's like, it's bad for New Orleans. And do you think that at any point in time it gets to the point where New Orleans is beating Detroit bad enough that Patricia's thinking, "Oh, I can't run Adrian Peterson," because I'm not sold that it does.
I mean, they seem inclined to want to run Adrian Peterson, but
so I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I have no issues with it. I mean,
Lattimore being out, I completely forgot that the Saints news dropped. I didn't even really check other than Thomas, but I mean that really does change things for me, honestly. So.
Yeah, it's a weird spot. We can move to tight end though. I think it's tough because I'm not sold that literally one tight end gets just a ridiculous amount of ownership, but we'll project who likely would if someone is getting it, and that's going to be Darren Waller, 5,200. Henry Ruggs has been ruled out. Henry Ruggs is doubtful. Brian Edwards has been ruled out. Darren Waller's like the guy now. The problem that me and you discussed before coming on here is that he plays the Bills, who one can literally just take Waller out of the game the same way that the Patriots did because they don't have anyone else, and two are actually really good against tight ends, but obviously that hasn't been on display this year because their linebackers have been hurt. So I know that you're off Waller specifically in cash. I'm also off Waller in cash, but I do think that he probably gets the majority of the ownership of people that are spending up. So who are you pivoting to here?
Yeah, and you know, like any projection systems are gonna pop Waller out as a great play. I'll say it. I really don't care. Like if I'm wrong at the end of the week, you can tell me. But Darren Waller's a bad play on the slate. If he's gonna get ownership, he's literally a bad play. I'm not gonna play any Darren Waller. like we talked about it. The Dable is of Belichickian descent, and you know that he's probably watching the tape of the Patriots and the Raiders, seeing exactly what they did to Darren Waller, and they've never historically been bad against tight ends. The Bills are really good against tight ends, so I think it's a horrible spot. But I think you and I are in agreement. The best, in my opinion, the best tight end play in the entire slate is Mike Yasiki. He's basically, I joked like after week 1, like, were we going to get to a point where they moved him to wide receiver on DraftKings, like on the DFS sites? He literally plays slot receiver. He's first on the team in percentage of air yards per next gen stats. He's first on the team in targets. And the Seahawks, have historically struggled against tight ends, and they've historically struggled in the slot. They're really bad in the slot this year. Look at what. So I played CeeDee Lamb last week thinking he was going to go off in the slot, and they for some reason limited him, and they just imported Cedric. What, I don't even know what is this kid's name?
Cedric Wilson.
Cedric Wilson. Yeah, they brought this guy off the street. This rookie, put him in the slot, and he goes for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think it's a smash spot for Yasiki, especially if you're expecting that game to shoot out. Obviously, it's like a 54 over under. So I think it's a really really good spot for Yasiki. I'm going to be overweight to him on both sides.
I 100% agree. Mike Gesicki will be the second guy of my Dolphins stack that I'm using. I can nearly guarantee that. But I'll go with someone else. I'll move down a little bit, a few $100s to TJ Hawkinson, and I will use what you said to the point where Detroit might have to throw in this game. And instead of going Marvin Jones, I will show Hawkinson. Dude, New Orleans cannot guard the tight end whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Darren Waller, what did Darren Waller do against them on Monday night a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, that was crazy. So, I don't see a reason why you can't use Hawkinson. My biggest issue at this point, to keep it 100% honest, is that he's only 300 away from Mike Gesicki, and I'm probably not using 2 tight ends. So I do like Hawkinson as a tournament play. I just probably would just go to Mike Gesicki, though. I don't know if you feel like Hawkinson's fine instead of Gesicki. Like I would never talk you off of it. I just have a hard time pulling the trigger myself.
No, I think Hawkinson is fine. On both sides, really. I have no issues with that. It's just I play like 2 or 3 lineups, right? So I know I'm going to play Gesicki in at least 2 of the 3. But if I was playing like 10 teams, I would definitely have some Hawkinson exposure. At least on 1, maybe 2. But I would definitely get some exposure to him.
I agree completely. The other tight end that just seems to continue to get quite a bit of ownership, as he should. His advanced numbers, everything you're looking in for a breakout is just off the charts for him, is obviously Logan Thomas. At his price has dropped to 3,500. We know that Sims has been ruled out for Washington. It looks like McLaurin is actually hurt, so he might not play. Logan Thomas is going to probably be the guy unless McLaurin suits up. So assuming you pivot off Logan Thomas, who are you looking at down there?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned this to me in a text earlier, but I kind of put an update in my game-by-game article. I am kind of interested in Adam Troutman for 2,500 on DraftKings on the other side of that Lions game, but 2,500 is just so cheap for a tight end. Speaking of the Saints news, like, we know Jared Cook's out, and with Thomas out, like, they need guys to throw to. So I think Tre'Quan Smith's a really good receiver. I think he will be in my tournament pool. They have Sanders as well, but they really don't have much else to throw to outside of Sanders, Tre'Quan Smith, and then obviously Kamara. So I think Troutman's interesting. He's best comp to Dallas Goedert on Player Profiler. Obviously, he was really good in college at Dayton, just a small school. But I think anytime we get a tight end that's 2,500 that's in play, I will play him in tournaments because he just doesn't need to do much to hit value.
Yeah, I really like Troutman. I liked him coming out of college. I just worry, what if they give Josh Hill?
They certainly could.
It seems like Troutman's more of
I think Troutman has more
guy.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Troutman seems to run more routes, whereas Hill blocks a little bit more. And I think Troutman just has more upside in general. But like, what does he need to do? Catch like a couple passes?
Yeah, and what if he falls into the end zone?
Yeah, it's a really good play for tournaments, I think.
Yep, I agree. I like that. I'll move up a little bit to Dalton Schultz at 4,300. It's blowing my mind that I'm not seeing more people talking about him right now. Cleveland, he gave up 2 touchdowns.
Play tight ends against the Browns. Yeah. Man,
they gave up 2 touchdowns week 1 to Mark Andrews. Then they struggled against Uzomah early in the game. He got hurt. Drew Sample came in, caught like 7 balls or something. Who did Cleveland play last week? Oh, Logan Thomas.
Yeah, he had a decent game. He got targets. They didn't really connect. And then the red zone looks like for some reason went to Inman. He scored the 2 red zone touchdowns.
Yeah, so I'll take Dalton Schultz, especially since taking over completely. In 2 games, he's got 16 targets. He currently leads Dallas in red zone targets. I believe he has 4. We saw his upside with 9 for 88 and a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons. It's, to me, and I could be wrong on this, but it feels like people just either 1, aren't willing to admit how much Schultz is playing, or 2, they're not willing to admit that he's actually good because he was stuck behind Blake Jarwin. Either way, he's playing a ton and he's probably better than you're currently thinking he is. And then obviously with a matchup against Cleveland, throw in a touchdown on anything that he does, and he's most likely going to hit value, especially since he's sitting at only 4,300.
Yeah, and Jason Witten saw a ton of targets for this team last year, so it's not like the Cowboys throw it enough that it's not like he can't get the targets. Like all the pass catchers are going to eat, but they throw the ball enough, especially with how they've been running the ball. So getting Tyron Smith back is huge in terms of running the football. But if we're thinking this game shoots out, like they're going to throw it enough that he can get his targets. It's not going to affect the other guys. Like he's still going to get targets.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all that we have for you guys this week. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead, give us a thumbs up. Comment who your favorite pivots are. Make sure you let us know the chalk that you're pivoting off of. If you want to pick up one of our NFL packages, you can get them weekly or monthly at dfskarma.com/shop. All of our content will be up by tomorrow. I believe that's when Final Thoughts comes out from Ben. We have plenty of free content on dfskarma.com, so go check it out. And good luck, everyone, this week.
Welcome to